The girl stood at the fence line like she'd materialized from the dust itself. Caleb Mercer saw her from the porch, small frame, maybe 14, dress so faded the original color had surrendered years ago. She didn't wave, didn't call out, just stood there with her hands gripping the top rail, staring at the ranch house like it was something holy. Behind her, barely visible through the evening haze, two smaller shapes huddled near a scraggly cottonwood. Children, younger, one of them coughing in wet, rattling bursts that carried across the dry valley. Caleb set down his coffee cup. The metal rang against the porch rail. He'd been alone on this land for 3 years, ever since the fever took Mary and their son in the same week, ever since silence became the only language the house spoke. He'd grown accustomed to empty rooms, to meals that tasted like ash, to the way grief settled into your bones like winter cold that never quite left. The girl didn't move. Caleb stood, his boots scraping wood. He was 42 but felt older. The war had aged him. Losing his family had finished the job. His hands were scarred from rope and wire, his face weathered to leather, his eyes the color of stone that had seen too much and forgotten how to look away. He walked toward the fence. As he approached, details sharpened. The girl's hair hung in matted tangles. Her feet were wrapped in cloth and twine, not shoes, just rags bound tight to keep the skin from splitting further. Her face carried the hollow look of someone who'd stopped expecting kindness weeks ago. "Evening," Caleb said quietly. The girl flinched. Her eyes darted to him, then away. She opened her mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. "You lost?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not lost, just desperate." "Can we?" Her voice cracked. She tried again. "Can we sleep in your barn tonight? Just tonight. We won't steal nothing. We'll be gone before first light." Caleb looked past her to the two smaller children. A boy, maybe 10, rail-thin with a face too serious for his age. A girl, no more than 6, sitting in the dirt with her head resting against the boy's shoulder. The cough came from her, deep and wet, the kind that meant pneumonia if it wasn't already. "You got folks?" Caleb asked. The older girl's jaw tightened. "No, sir." "How long you been walking?" She hesitated. 4 days, maybe 5. "Walking from where?" "Fort Laramie. We left." "Left, not traveled, not moved, left." The word carried weight. Caleb studied her face. There was a bruise along her jaw, greenish-yellow and fading. Her wrists showed marks too, red lines where something had rubbed the skin raw. Rope burns, maybe, or shackles. His chest tightened. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah, that's my brother Daniel. The little one is Emma." Her voice dropped. "She's sick. I know she's sick. I just need one night to let her rest somewhere warm, somewhere dry." The sun was dropping fast behind the ridge. In another hour, the temperature would plummet. The little girl, Emma, wouldn't survive another night in the open, not with lungs already struggling. Caleb looked at Sarah, really looked. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, she had Mary's eyes. Not the color, but the expression. That fierce, protective desperation Mary used to get when their son caught fever, when she'd sit up all night pressing cool cloths to his forehead, whispering prayers into the dark. He'd failed Mary, failed their boy. But these 3 were standing in front of him, breathing, waiting. "Barn's got rats," Caleb said. Sarah's face fell. "House has got beds," he continued. "You'll sleep inside." She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "Come on," Caleb said, opening the gate, "before the cold sets in." Sarah didn't move, her eyes filled with something that looked like pain. "Why?" she whispered. "Why what? Why would you let us in? You don't know us. We could be anything." Caleb met her gaze. "You're 3 kids who need a warm place to sleep. That's all I need to know." Sarah's lip trembled. She bit down hard, forcing it still. Then she turned and motioned to her siblings. Daniel helped Emma stand. The little girl swayed, barely conscious. Caleb walked ahead, opening the door to a house that hadn't seen children in 3 years. The air inside smelled like old coffee and wood smoke. Dust hung in the last rays of sunlight slanting through the windows. Sit, Caleb said, gesturing to the table. They sat, all three, stiff as boards, hands folded, eyes wide. Caleb moved to the stove, stirring the pot of stew he'd made that morning. Too much for one man, like always. He ladled 3 bowls, set them on the table with bread he'd bought from town 2 days prior. Eat, he said. Sarah stared at the food like it might vanish. Daniel reached out slowly, touched the edge of the bowl. Emma just coughed, her small body shaking. Caleb knelt beside the little girl. Her forehead was burning. Her lips had a BL. Jewish tenter. She needs willow bark tea, he said quietly, and a doctor. We don't have money for a doctor, Sarah said, her voice tight. Didn't ask if you did. Caleb stood, moving to the shelf where he kept his medicine supplies. He brewed the tea, cooled it with well water, brought it to Emma in a tin cup. Small sips, he told her gently. Emma drank. Her eyes stayed on him the whole time, huge, dark, terrified. It's all right, Caleb murmured. You're safe here. But even as he said it, he saw Sarah's expression. She didn't believe him, couldn't, because safe was a word that had stopped meaning anything to her long ago. They ate in silence. Daniel stuffed bread into his mouth like he'd forgotten how to chew. Sarah ate slowly, methodically, watching Caleb with the caution of a wild animal that had been baited too many times. When the bowls were empty, Caleb showed them to the back room, the room that used to belong to his son. He'd kept the door closed for 3 years, hadn't changed the sheets, hadn't moved the carved wooden horse on the nightstand. You can sleep here, Caleb said, his voice rougher than intended. Sarah looked at the bed, real blankets, clean linen, a quilt Mary had stitched by hand. All of us, Sarah asked. All of you. Daniel climbed in first, pulling Emma close. Sarah lingered in the doorway. Thank you, she whispered. Caleb nodded. Sleep, we'll talk in the morning. He closed the door, stood in the hallway. His hands were shaking. Behind him, the house still felt empty, but for the first time in 3 years, it didn't feel dead. Morning came slow and cold. Caleb woke before dawn like always. He stoked the fire, made coffee, fried eggs and bacon he'd been saving. The smell filled the house, rich and warm and alive. He heard movement from the back room, soft footsteps, the creak of floorboards. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Her hair was still tangled, her dress still torn, but her face looked less hollow. Sleep had given her back a fragment of humanity. Morning, Caleb said. Morning, she hesitated. Emma's fever broke. She's breathing easier. Good, Caleb gestured to the table. Sit, I made breakfast. Sarah sat, slowly, like she was waiting for the trap to spring. Caleb set a plate in front of her. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, real food, not scraps. You don't have to do this, Sarah said quietly. Do what? Feed us, be kind, we'll leave after breakfast, like I said. Caleb sipped his coffee. Where will you go? Sarah's jaw tightened. West, maybe California, somewhere far. Running from something. Her eyes flashed. That your business? No, Caleb admitted, but if you're in trouble, I'd rather know what kind. Sarah stared at her plate, her hands clenched into fists. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. You ever heard of the Garrison School? Caleb's stomach dropped. He had. Everyone in Wyoming Territory had heard of the Garrison School for Wayward Youth. It wasn't a school, it was a workhouse, a place where orphans and abandoned children were sent under the guise of Christian education. In reality, they were leased out as labor, unpaid, unprotected, sometimes never seen again. You were at Garrison, Caleb said, not a question. Sarah nodded. 3 years, me, Daniel, and Emma. Our parents died of cholera in '68. The county said we needed proper care. They sent us there. Her voice hardened. Proper care meant 12-hour days in the fields, beatings if we slowed down, chains if we tried to run. Caleb's hands tightened around his cup. The man who ran it, Sarah continued, Mr. Hewitt, he'd sell kids sometimes, to ranchers, to men who wanted, workers or worse. Her eyes met Caleb's. Emma got sick 2 weeks ago, real sick. I begged Hewitt to get a doctor. He said she wasn't worth the cost, said if she died, it was God's will. So you ran, Caleb said. So I ran, Sarah's voice cracked. I waited until night, cut through the fence, grabbed Daniel and Emma. We've been walking ever since. I know Hewitt's looking for us. He always sends men after runners. He says it's about legal guardianship, but it's about the money. 3 kids means 3 sets of hands, 3 sources of labor. Caleb set down his cup. His mind was racing. Sarah, he said slowly, what was your family name before Garrison? She frowned. Talbot. Why? The air left Caleb's lungs. Talbot. He knew that name. Your father, Caleb said carefully, was he James Talbot, worked a homestead near the Platte River? Sarah's eyes widened. You knew him. Caleb stood abruptly, walked to the window. His reflection stared back, older, harder, haunted. I knew him, Caleb said quietly. During the war, I was with the Union Cavalry. We were stationed near the Platte in '65, right after Appomattox. Your father, he was accused of harboring Confederate deserters, giving them food, shelter. The colonel wanted to make an example, burn him out. Sarah went very still. I was there, Cal. Ebb continued, his voice thick. I was part of the unit sent to his homestead. I didn't know your father, didn't know if the accusations were true. I was just following orders. He turned to face her. We burned the barn, took his livestock. Your father begged us to stop, said he had a wife and 3 children, said he'd given food to starving men, Confederate or not, because it was the Christian thing to do. Sarah's face had gone pale. The colonel didn't care, Caleb said. He had your father arrested, sent him to a military prison in Denver. I heard later he died there. Pneumonia, they said. His voice dropped to a whisper. I rode away that night and told myself I was just doing my duty, that it wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have stopped it. Silence filled the room like smoke. You destroyed my family, Sarah said. Her voice was flat, cold. Yes, Caleb said, I did. Sarah stood slowly. Her hands were trembling. You took everything from us, and now you feed us, give us a bed, pretend to be kind. I'm not pretending, Caleb said. I'm trying to. Trying to what? Sarah's voice rose. Make yourself feel better, erase what you did. No, Caleb's voice was steady. I can't erase it. I can't bring your father back. I can't give you those 3 years. He met her gaze. But I can give you this. A safe place, food, a home, if you'll let me. Sarah laughed bitterly. You think that makes it better? No, Caleb said quietly. I don't. She stared at him. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. Why didn't you stop them? She whispered. Why didn't you say something? I was scared, Caleb admitted. Scared of disobeying orders, scared of what the colonel would do. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that I was just one man. He swallowed hard. I was wrong. Sarah turned away. Her shoulders shook. Behind her, Daniel appeared in the doorway, holding Emma's hand. They'd been listening. Sarah, Daniel's voice was small. She wiped her face roughly. Get your things, we're leaving. But now, Daniel. Caleb didn't move, didn't argue. He'd learned long ago that you couldn't force forgiveness. You could only stand in the wreckage of what you'd done and accept the consequences. Sarah walked past him toward the back room. But before she disappeared, she stopped. That carved horse, she said quietly, on the nightstand. My father made those. He used to sell them at market. Caleb's throat tightened. I know, I bought it from him a week before the arrest for my son. Sarah looked at him, really looked. Your son, she asked. Dead, Caleb said. Fever 3 years ago. Something shifted in her expression, not forgiveness, but recognition, the understanding that suffering doesn't choose sides. She didn't say anything else, just walked into the back room and closed the door. Caleb stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of his choices. They didn't leave. Not that morning, not the next day. Sarah didn't speak to Caleb. She moved through the house like a shadow, feeding Emma, helping Daniel, avoiding eye contact. But she didn't pack, didn't walk out the door. Caleb gave her space. He worked the ranch, mended fences, tended the horses. At meals, he set food on the table and ate in silence. Daniel would sometimes ask questions about the horses, about the mountains, about how to fix a broken wagon wheel, and Caleb would answer gently, carefully, aware of Sarah's eyes watching him like a hawk. 3 days passed. On the 4th morning, riders appeared on the horizon. Caleb saw them from the barn, 4 men on horseback, moving slow and deliberate across the valley floor. They weren't drifters, weren't ranchers. They had the look of men on a mission. His gut twisted. He walked quickly back to the house. Sarah was at the stove, stirring oatmeal. She looked up when he entered. "Riders coming," Caleb said, 4 of them. The color drained from her face. "Hewitt." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Caleb moved to the window. The riders were closer now. He could see their faces. Hard men, the kind hired for enforcement, not conversation. "Take Daniel and Emma," Caleb said. "Get in the root cellar, don't make a sound." "What are you going to do?" Sarah's voice shook. "Talk to them. They won't just talk, they'll—" "I know," Caleb met her eyes. "Trust me." It was a lot to ask, trust from someone he'd wronged, but Sarah nodded, grabbed her siblings, and disappeared through the back door. Caleb stepped onto the porch. He leaned against the rail, arms crossed, face calm. The riders stopped at the gate. The man in front was tall and thin, with a neatly trimmed beard and cold eyes. He wore a black coat and carried papers in his saddlebag. Authority, not violence, at least on the surface. "Morning," the man called out. "You Caleb Mercer?" "I am." "Name's Hewitt. Run the garrison school up north. I'm looking for 3 runaways. Boy, 2 girls. Thought maybe you'd seen them." Caleb kept his expression neuter. "Al, lot of folks pass through. What makes you think they'd come here?" Hewitt smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Tracks led this way, fresh tracks, child-sized." "Could be anyone's kids." "Could be." Hewitt dismounted, walked closer. His men stayed on their horses, hands resting on rifle stocks. "But I don't think so. See, I've got legal guardianship over these children, county appointed, which means if you're harboring them, you're breaking the law." "Is that right?" Caleb said flatly. "It is." Hewitt pulled the papers from his coat. "Right here, signed by Judge Carver himself. Those children are property of the garrison school until they reach majority age, or until they're legally adopted." He tilted his head. "You adopted any children lately, Mr. Mercer?" Caleb didn't answer. Hewitt's smile widened. "Didn't think so. So if they're here, you need to hand them over. Otherwise, I'll have to involve the sheriff." "Sheriff's 2 days' ride from here," Caleb said. "True." Hewitt's hand drifted to the pistol on his hip. "But I've got 4 men with me, and you're alone." Caleb pushed off the rail, standing to his full height. "I've been alone before." Hewitt studied him. "You a soldier?" "Was. Which side? Does it matter?" "Might." Hewitt's tone hardened. "See, I don't like men who interfere, and I especially don't like men who think they can steal from me." "Those kids aren't property," Caleb said quietly. "They're human beings." "They're wards of the state," Hewitt snapped, "and you've got no claim to them." "Maybe not legally," Caleb said, "but morally, I've got more claim than you do." Hewitt's jaw tightened. He glanced at his men, then back at Caleb. "Last chance, Mercer. Hand them over, or we come in and take them." Caleb didn't move. No. The air went still. Hewitt's hand moved toward his gun. And then, from down the road, came the sound of hoofbeats. More riders, a lot of them. Hewitt turned, frowning. A group of men, 6, 7, maybe 8, rode up fast. They weren't strangers. Caleb recognized them. Ranch hands from neighboring spreads, men he'd worked beside during cattle drives, old soldiers who'd settled in the valley after the war. At the front was Thomas Yates, a grizzled rancher with a gray beard and a Sharp's rifle across his saddle. "Problem here, Caleb," Thomas called out. Caleb kept his eyes on Hewitt, not sure yet. Thomas dismounted. The others did too. They spread out, flanking Hewitt's men, no weapons drawn, not yet, but the threat was clear. "Who the hell are you?" Hewitt demanded. "Neighbors," Thomas said. "Heard there might be trouble, thought we'd ride over." "This is legal business," Hewitt said, his voice rising. "I've got papers." "Papers don't mean much out here," Thomas interrupted. "Not when they're used to justify cruelty." "You calling me a liar?" "I'm calling you a man who leases children like livestock." Thomas's voice was cold. "We've heard about Garrison, about the kids who disappear, about the beatings. You think we don't talk? That word doesn't travel." Hewitt's face went red. "I run a Christian institution." "You run a prison," Thomas said flatly. "And Caleb's a good man. If he says those kids stay, they stay." Hewitt looked around. His men were outnumbered now. The valley locals stood firm, silent, waiting. "This isn't over," Hewitt said through clenched teeth. "Yes," Caleb said quietly, "it is." Hewitt glared at him. Then he mounted his horse, yanked the reins hard, and rode off. His men followed, casting dark looks over their shoulders. The valley went quiet again. Thomas walked up to the porch. "You all right?" Caleb nodded slowly. "How'd you know?" "Your mare came through my property yesterday, saddled but riderless, figured something was off, asked around, heard Hewitt was sniffing around the valley." Thomas glanced at the house. "Kids inside?" "Yeah. They safe now." "For today," Caleb said. "Hewitt's not the type to let go." Thomas spat into the dirt. "Then we'll make sure he does." The other men nodded. A quiet pact sealed without words. After they left, Caleb went inside. Sarah emerged from the root cellar, Emma in her arms, Daniel clutching her dress. "They're gone," Caleb said. Sarah's eyes were wide. Who were those men? "Neighbors," Caleb said simply. "People who don't let cruelty run their county." Sarah stared at him, then slowly she nodded. The days after Hewitt's visit felt different. Not easier, but lighter, like a weight had shifted, even if it hadn't fully lifted. Sarah stopped avoiding Caleb's eyes. She still didn't speak much, but when she did, her voice had lost some of its edge. She worked alongside him, feeding chickens, mending clothes, teaching Emma her letters at the kitchen table. Daniel followed Caleb everywhere. The boy was curious, eager, starved for guidance. Caleb taught him how to saddle a horse, how to check fence posts for rot, how to read the sky for weather changes. Daniel absorbed it all like dry earth soaking. "Up rain." Emma's cough faded. Color returned to her cheeks. She started smiling, shy at first, then more freely. She'd sit on the porch steps and watch the sunset, her small hands folded in her lap, humming tunes Caleb didn't recognize. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the valley turned gold, Sarah sat beside Caleb on the porch. They didn't speak for a long time, just watched Daniel chase a jackrabbit through the tall grass while Emma laughed. "I remember this place," Sarah said suddenly. Caleb looked at her. "I was little," she continued, "maybe 6. My father brought us here once. We were traveling to Fort Laramie. We stopped at a ranch to water the horses." She gestured to the barn. "That barn, I remember the red paint, the weather vane shaped like a rooster." Caleb's throat tightened. "I didn't know." "How could you?" Sarah's voice was soft. "It was just one day, one stop, but I remember your wife. She gave me an apple, let me pet a newborn calf." Sarah smiled faintly. "I thought it was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen." Caleb's chest ached. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what I took from you." Sarah didn't answer right away. She picked at a splinter on the porch rail, her brow furrowed. "I've been angry for so long," she said finally. "At the soldiers, at Hewitt, at God, at you." She looked at him. "But anger doesn't bring my father back, doesn't undo the past." "No," Caleb agreed, "it doesn't." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. "Just forget." "I don't think we forget," Caleb said. "I think we carry it, but we decide what it makes us." Sarah studied him for a long moment. You really think we can stay here? If you want to, Hewitt will come back. Let him, Caleb's voice was steady. I'm not letting him take you. Why? Sarah's voice cracked. Why do you care so much? Caleb looked out at the valley, at Daniel laughing, at Emma spinning in circles, arms wide. Because I lost my family once, he said quietly, and I can't bring them back, but maybe I can give you one. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them quickly, but not before Caleb saw. I don't forgive you, she whispered. I know, but I don't hate you either. Caleb nodded. That's enough. If you're still with me, here's the question that changes everything. If you were Caleb, could you forgive yourself? Could you look at those children every day and see past your guilt? Take a moment, think about that. And if this story is pulling you in, tap subscribe so you don't miss how it ends. The next week, Caleb rode to town. He returned with papers, legal adoption documents, signed and notarized. He set them on the kitchen table in front of Sarah. What's this? She asked. Adoption papers, Caleb said. For you, Daniel and Emma, if you'll have me as a guardian. Sarah stared at the documents. Her hands shook. You don't have to decide now, Caleb said. But if you sign, Hewitt's got no legal claim. The county recognizes you as my family. He can't touch you. Daniel peered over Sarah's shoulder. Does that mean we can stay? If your sister says yes, Caleb said. Emma tugged on Sarah's dress. Can we, Sarah, please? Sarah's tears came freely now. She looked at Caleb, at the man who destroyed her family and was now offering to rebuild it. I don't know if I can call you father, she said. I'm not asking you to, Caleb replied. I'm just asking you to let me try. Sarah picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the paper. And then, slowly, she signed. Daniel cheered. Emma clapped. Caleb exhaled a breath he'd been holding for weeks. Thank you, Sarah whispered. No, Caleb said, his voice thick. Thank you. Hewitt didn't come back. Not that week, not the next. But 6 weeks later, a rider appeared at the gate. Not Hewitt, someone else, a U.S. Marshal with a badge and a tired horse. Caleb met him at the fence. Mr. Mercer, the marshal asked. That's me. The marshal dismounted. Name's Garrett. I'm here about a man named Hewitt, runs the garrison school. Caleb's jaw tightened. What about him? He's been arrested, Garrett said. Federal charges, fraud, child endangerment, illegal labor practices. Turns out a lot of folks had complaints. Took some time to build a case, but we got him. He glanced at the house. Heard you were sheltering some of his runaways. They're not runaways, Caleb said firmly. They're my children, legally adopted. Garrett nodded. Good, because the garrison school's been shut down. Kids are being relocated to proper homes. Hewitt's going to prison for a long time. He tipped his hat. Just wanted you to know, they're safe now. Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. Appreciate you riding all this way to tell me. Least I could do, Garrett mounted his horse. You did a good thing, Mercer. Not everyone would have stood up to a man like Hewitt. After the marshal left, Caleb walked back to the house. Sarah was at the stove cooking stew. Daniel was outside chopping wood. With the axe Caleb had given him. Emma was at the table drawing pictures with charcoal on scraps of paper. Who was that? Sarah asked. Marshal, Caleb said. Hewitt's been arrested. Sarah's hands stilled. She turned slowly. Arrested. Federal charges. He's done. The school's shut down. Sarah's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the stove to steady herself. Tears streamed down her face, not sadness, but relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. We are safe, she whispered. You're safe, Caleb confirmed. Emma looked up. Really? Really, Caleb said, kneeling beside her. No one's taking you anywhere. Emma threw her arms around his neck. I love you, she said. Caleb's breath caught. He hugged her tight. I love you too, sweetheart. Daniel burst through the door. Did I hear right? Hewitt's gone. He's gone, Sarah said, wiping her face. Daniel whooped. grabbed Emma and spun her around. She giggled, her laughter filling the house like music. Sarah looked at Caleb, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled, a real smile, full and unguarded. "Thank you," she said. Caleb shook his head. "You don't owe me thanks." "Yes," Sarah said firmly, "I do." Weeks turned into months. Winter came, then spring. The ranch thrived. Caleb taught Daniel how to break a horse, how to build a fence that wouldn't fall in high wind. Sarah learned to manage the household finances, to barter at market, to hold her ground with suppliers who tried to cheat her. Emma grew stronger. Her laughter became the soundtrack of the ranch, bright and clear, echoing across the valley. The neighbors stopped seeing them as the rancher and the runaways. They were just a family now: Caleb, Sarah, Daniel, and Emma Mercer. One evening, as the sun set over the mountains, Caleb and Sarah sat on the porch. Daniel was teaching Emma to play harmonica. The notes were clumsy but earnest. "I've been thinking," Sarah said quietly. "About what?" "About my father," she paused. "I think he would have liked you." Caleb's throat tightened. "You think so?" "I do." Sarah looked at him. "He always said forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing not to let the hurt define you." She smiled faintly. "Took me a long time to understand that." "And now?" Caleb asked. "Now I think I'm starting to." Caleb reached over and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. Inside the house, Emma hit a clear note on the harmonica. Daniel cheered. They laughed together, the sound of a family being born from the wreckage of two broken ones. Caleb looked out at the valley, at the land he'd worked alone for so long. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, alive. He thought of Mary, of his son, of the life he'd lost. And he thought of the life he'd been given a second chance to build. He couldn't undo the past, couldn't bring back the dead, couldn't erase his mistakes. But he could do this. He could give 3 children a home, a family, a future. And in doing so, he'd found his own redemption. Not through grand gestures or heroic acts, but through the quiet, daily work of love, through showing up, through choosing, again and again, to be the man he wished he'd been years ago. The sun dipped below the ridge, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Daniel started a new song. Emma joined in, her voice small but sure. Sarah rested her head on Caleb's shoulder. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt at peace. The past would always be there, a shadow that never quite left, but it didn't define him anymore. What defined him now was this: the warmth of a family gathered close, the sound of laughter in a house that had been silent too long, and the knowledge that even broken things could be made whole again. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole.